everyone, and welcome to Data Science Dojo's live webinar and Ask Me Anything on interviewing for data science positions. Just to introduce myself, I'm Blair Heckel. I'm the Senior Marketing Manager here at Data Science Dojo, and I will be moderating today's webinar. Before we begin the webinar, I would like to mention that all lines will be muted for the duration of the call, but questions are encouraged and will be answered at the end of the presentation. The presentation will take about 20 to 30 minutes, and then we will get to answering your questions that were previously asked through your registration form and various Meetup and Facebook groups. After that, we will open the floor to any questions we didn't get through in this presentation. To ask a question, use the Questions module on the bottom of your screen. So feel free to submit your questions anytime during the presentation by typing them into the chat box. Moving on to today's agenda, I will provide a brief introduction of our speakers today, Rebecca Merrett and Tarun Shrivas. Rebecca will then jump right into the presentation. We will then jump into answering all of the questions that were asked prior to the presentation and any questions that are asked live during this webinar. In the event that we do not have enough time to answer all questions, feel free to post any questions that you do have in the chat box or send us an email at help@datasciencedojo.com, and Rebecca, Tarun, and our other data scientists will be happy to answer them. We ask that you please participate, as this will allow us to ensure that all of your questions are answered. After the webinar has ended, please let us know what other webinars and types of content you would like to see. And now I would like to introduce you to our speakers for today's session. Rebecca is one of our data scientists at Data Science Dojo. She is also a lead instructor and is in charge of the curriculum development. When not offering in-person trainings, she produces learning exercises and tutorials on machine learning and R programming. She has also worked on some consulting projects for clients at Data Science Dojo. Rebecca holds a postgraduate diploma in mathematics and statistics from the University of Southern Queensland. She has a background in technical writing for games development and has written for tech publications. You can also check out her free tutorials on Data Science Dojo tutorials. And here we have Tarun, who is another one of our outstanding data scientists and lead instructors. Tarun is a seasoned professional in marketing research and analytics. He has more than a decade of experience in analytics on political campaigns, consumer behavior, and CPG industry. Tarun leads the content development and analytics at Data Science Dojo. Tarun holds a master's degree in business analytics from Seattle University. Thank you, Rebecca and Tarun, and welcome to today's Ask Me Anything on Data Science job interviews.
Hi, folks. Welcome to this Ask Me Anything session on the kinds of interviews you could expect for the role of a data scientist or a similar role in this field. And thanks, Blair, for the introduction. So I'll just give you a quick presentation or quick introduction to the types of interviews I've come across, examples of questions you might get, and how these kind of relate to specific roles, as well as kind of resume tips and what not to do based on the interviews that I've helped held at Data Science Dojo. So I've only helped hire for kind of very junior level data scientist roles, and we've kind of worked on some consulting projects at Data Science Dojo, and I've come across some things that you might not be aware of that could be kind of hindering you from getting through the interview stage. So I want to keep this pretty short so we can just jump straight into questions. So let me first take you through the main stuff you probably would want to know on how to best prepare yourself, not only for the interview, but also for working in this industry. And then we'll kind of open it up for questions. Okay, so we've hired for some junior level data scientists at Data Science Dojo, and as a training company that skills up thousands of students worldwide, we know that if you can successfully teach or explain something to other people, then you're likely to truly know that something. We definitely look for this when hiring, even in my role, whether I'm helping on the data science consulting projects or, building a working prototype or sourcing new data or extracting new features, whatever it is, I still need to be able to clearly articulate things for the client. Also, majority of my role involves, producing data science learning material for students, so that certainly requires this skill. But aside from this, you'll need to know kind of three main things, some things more than other things, depending on your specific role. So as a data scientist, you need to be able to obviously query data in some sort of database or retrieve the data that you need, so you can start working with it. So besides your kind of simple select statements, you might need to, extract out rows of data or from separate tables using the same ID, for example, filter it down based on some kind of conditions you're interested in. You might want to just take a sample just to have a first play instead of reading the entire data set. You need to be able to you need to be able to identify issues with the data and clean and treat the data appropriately. Analyze your variables to extract key features or introduce new ones, experiment with your models and the like. So scripting languages are a little bit more friendly to build quick prototypes and experiment around with data, more so than core programming languages like C. So depending on your role, you might need also an understanding of how tools like Hadoop work, setting up clusters to handle large terabyte levels of data or help integrate your model into a real world, front-end application. To understand the likelihood of an event happening, the basis of prediction, basically, what the data distribution says about your data and the like, you need to know some maths and stats. So conditional probability, Bayes' theorem, normal and binomial distribution, central limit theorem, linear regression, these are pretty core. And if you're more on the product side of things, making decisions based on tests and data, then A/B testing is likely to be asked during an interview. Now, there are so many role titles you might have come across in this field, but I've kind of clustered them into three main types. So a data scientist should and kind of almost is expected to be able to do the work of a data analyst and build predictive models, which includes processing and cleaning data, isolating key features, perhaps collecting new features or engineering new features. A data analyst, in most cases, is only expected to kind of visualize and segment data in a way that would lead to actionable insight. Where a business identifies a key problem shown in the data, or a key opportunity, or a key trend, or discovers something hidden that was not obvious before. And this might include a more product manager role, driving the product forward through better insights and tests on the data. As a data scientist, you also have the ability to do this, but in addition to this, you can build scripts or programs that can clean, analyze, feature engineer, model, test, then deploy in the real world. And a data engineer might be dedicated to help deploy your analytics solution in the real world, through a front-end application or something, or integrating it into a system that, executes your modeling script when new data comes onto the scene and needs to be modeled on. So here are some example questions just to give you an idea, more on the technical side of things. So if you can answer these kinds of questions, then you're on the right track, but you might want to Google a list of questions to practice a set of different problems, increasing in difficulty. This, I would say, is more on the easier end, more on the not too difficult kind of scale. So in this SQL example, so table A contains data about the customer ID and the number of purchases a customer has made till date. And table B contains data about the customer ID, their first and last name, and the country they reside in. So then how many purchases are coming from the country Canada? So you need to be able to figure out that you need a total sum of the purchases where the country is equal to Canada. And using the customer ID, you would join these tables, one storing the purchase count information, the other storing the country information. In the maths and stats question, so students' academic scores follow normal distribution with a mean of 18 and a standard deviation of 6. What proportion of students have scored between 18 and 24? So you should be familiar with basic things like a z-score for normal distributions where, you difference the sample mean from the population mean in proportion to the standard deviation. So here it states 18 being the population mean, with 18 as one sample mean and 24 as another sample mean, and a standard deviation of 6. So we can calculate z using these, and also using the z-table, we can look up the z-scores and find the probabilities. Now, for kind of more product-focused role, you might get a question like this, and this is just an example. There are many other different types of questions, but it's just to give you a bit of an idea. So a company has created a web page to promote a product and encourage sign-up. One version of the page includes the line, "Find out more," and the other version, "Learn more about us." Before going ahead with learn more about us, what actions would you take to ensure this is the right choice in terms of user sign up? So this is a typical A/B question. It might be introducing a new feature and say, a website landing page encourages the sign up of a product. So you would A/B test this, where some users who land on the page see find out more and others see learn more about us. And you could say, use a t-test to see if there is a real difference between the number of signups of the different page versions. And obviously you need to treat both pages fairly. One will not be given, one more exposure than the other. It would be a fair experiment. So here are some commonly used tools that you might come across in your role as a data scientist, depending on your organization, depending on the kind of projects that you'll be doing. And whatever tool just kind of gets the job done, I guess. As for R and Python, there's usually strong R and Python wars going on at the moment, but it just depends on whatever tool gets the job done. So both R and Python, I think, have an extensive set of libraries or tools to help you automate a lot of those everyday tasks when working with data. But if you come into a job where, say, they have set up mostly an R environment and then start telling everybody they must change all their scripting to Python or vice versa, that might not always go down well. So just go along with whatever the company's dev environment or analytics team feel most comfortable with, and whichever just ensures we'll get the job done, right? Once you learn one scripting language and understand the logic of programming, you can pretty much pick up another quite easily. As a data engineer, you're likely to work with tools such as Hadoop, MapReduce, Spark, anything that's going to process terabyte levels of data. And as an analyst, some interactive visualization tool might be your go-to for presentations and reports, such as Tableau. So let's now look at resumes, tips to help you. It's all well and good to tell you about how to kind of master the interview, but if you haven't mastered your resume first, you won't be even getting to that stage. So I guess think about the structure of your resume. Obviously, these might be some obvious points, but you want to put your strongest selling points right up the front, bury your weaknesses. So whether you've worked on a really interesting project, it doesn't have to be a rocket science project, but just one that the company might resonate with. It's something that it's in their field, or that's an application that they think they would want to build themselves as well. Kind of highlight that, put that right up the front. Projects are kind of everything. I think everything's project oriented. So also think about the design. Try not to have pages and pages of resume. Try to get at least all the important stuff on the first page. If not, have a very direct, straight to the point, single page resume if possible. Otherwise, you could look at grouping related elements together to try and condense it a bit. Also, if you do have on-the-job experience, it's best to describe results you've achieved rather than what actions you took. So if you've moved a metric in your organization, definitely highlight that. Use metrics to showcase your success. And, list what kind of techniques and technologies you've used as well, but you want to make it clear to the HR person or the reader that results are important to you. So show that you're kind of results driven as well. Obviously, don't forget to hyperlink to your projects. If you have a GitHub profile of, personal projects that you've taken on, link to that. Obviously, I think that can go a long way for certain companies who look for people who go outside their day-to-day job because they truly do have a passion for something. So kind of highlight that as well. It goes without saying, but customization is super important. So, if there's certain skill sets that are banged on about in the job description, try to find the projects or the tools or technologies that kind of align well with that, and highlight and restructure your resume every time based on that. So here are some more kind of tips if you like. So while you can definitely include personal projects in a resumes, you should pick ones with some relevance or connection to the job you're applying for. So kind of curate it a little bit. Projects should, obviously demonstrate your technical skills, but ideally they'll also kind of demonstrate how your technical skills are applicable to solving a real world business problem that the company might also be facing. So let's just say you did a marketing analytics tool and you're applying for a marketing company. You're not going to choose your, traffic optimization tool as the one to highlight. It's kind of an obvious thing, but just try to really apply a sorting algorithm to your resume where you make it, like, put all the highly relevant, valuable stuff first. It's good to also mention the other projects, but just make sure that the ones that are bang on about that really are high relevance to the company are not missed. Let's go to what not to do now, and this is just from our personal experiences with hiring, but I imagine that this could also apply to a lot of other companies out there, and you might not fully be aware yet what could be hindering you through the interview process. Of course, this is hard to state as a fact because a lot of it is just, it could be down to the particular company, but it's still useful to mention it either way. So if a potential employee cannot really provide clear examples of their experience working with data, whether it's on a more rudimentary level or on a highly kind of, whether it's modeling with data or whether it's doing something more exciting, or whatever it is, if they can't provide clear examples, then obviously that's not going to convince the hiring manager that they've actually had a real involvement in that project. Or they might mention data science projects, but they keep their involvement very vague. So think about this when you go for an interview. You should be able to give clear examples in how you've worked with each component of a project in the past to solve a specific problem. What were the processes and outcomes, approaches, brainstorming things that you did, things that you tried that failed. Don't worry about, specifics are important, so don't worry about rambling on. Rambling on can sometimes be a good thing. So another thing is that data scientists aren't really much use if their findings make no contribution towards business goals. This could sometimes apply to researchers who, although they're doing kind of interesting research, they're just sort of not really contributing to a business goal. So that can sort of be unattractive to some employers. So to bridge the perennial gap between, research and business, or data science and business, or even IT and business, the data scientists must have a foot in both worlds and be able to translate and speak the language of each, and be able to know that the project they're doing will have some kind of end goal impact. So they're not just going off on a personal kind of interest project, but actually a project that's going to really impact the business in some form, whether it's a small impact or a huge impact, whatever it is. It just needs to be relatable to the business. And I guess, on that point, it's not necessary that someone with a stellar academic or research background won't make a great data scientist, but a key component is to understand how findings affect business goals and kind of delivering those actionable insights to leaders. This is critical, to your success, and they must have some kind of practical projects to show that. Many research academics have exceptional data science skills, don't get me wrong, but without some kind of strong interest on the business side of things, to at least show that they're at least interested, it could be a bit off-putting for the hiring manager or for the stakeholders, who are at play here. So, and a good data scientist might want to obviously ask questions about the kind of data that the company is working with, the projects that they're working on, an understanding of maybe even the mission statement of the company. What is it that they stand for and they're trying to do at the end of the day? So not being interested in that, like just not showing an interest in the kind of problem areas that the company is facing at the moment when it comes to their data, the kind of projects that they aspire to or they hope to achieve, or even like a directions or a new team that they're opening up. If you don't really show any interest in that, then how can you expect someone to be interested in you as well? So just keep that in mind. So some other kind of things to look at. So here you could read from this slide, but I might talk about communication a bit. So it's important, obviously to communicate well with everyone. This is kind of on the softer skill sides. Everybody that you make contact with in your interview, you want to be the approachable person. You don't want to be the too serious person that whoever that you need to work with on a day-to-day basis can't approach you. So don't send out that vibe. You might not be fully aware of it, but just keep it in mind. So try to be the approachable person. Obviously take interest in other areas of the business, like other divisions, and also it doesn't really take much time to look up a company's About Us page, understand their mission statement. If you don't kind of bother to do that, then it's like I couldn't be bothered to take 10 seconds to Google your company. It might not go down well as well. So other business areas or other departments might be like, oh, have you read our About Us page? And if you haven't any idea of what this company does, it's really not good. So think about that. Also, talking in cliches. Now I wouldn't take this one to heart too much. Obviously, if you genuinely mean I'm a team player and I'm a perfectionist, that's great. But sometimes people could be wary if they talk in cliches too much. So they want to, you want to use this as an opportunity to differentiate yourself. I guess they've interviewed 10 other people who've also said they're a team player and they're also a perfectionist. So say something a little bit more real and down to earth that they might haven't heard before, that'll more likely result in them remembering you. And as I said, banging on about this, do ask questions about what are their problem areas, what data are you working with, which is the direction that you're going in now and that you see yourself going in. It shows that you take a genuine interest in what they're doing. Okay, so let's open it up for questions. After all, this is Ask Me Anything about, data science job interviews. Let's try to be fair and give everybody a good equal amount of time. Try not to, personalize this just to yourself or one-on-one about your own specific problem so others can get a chance and ask their questions too. I have included the team, so Tarun is going to be with me on chat, and we're here to answer all your questions, so let's fire away. Okay, while we're getting questions flooding through, which is great to see, I'm going to just nail it down to maybe the first, let's have a look at the top ones that we've kind of come across. Even before this AMA started, we had some questions piling in, which might be super useful to answer right now. So, handling LinkedIn invitations from strangers. So somebody's asking, how do I handle LinkedIn invitations from strangers, especially if they work for companies you're interested in? How can I kind of respond when a recruiter reaches out to you on LinkedIn? I'm just talking kind of from my personal experience, but what I would do, if you're interested in the company, obviously, to really have your heart set on working for them or working for a role in that company, I would use that. That's a brilliant opportunity. How do you handle it? Just grab it at the horns. And yeah. So I think spend time composing a reply about thanks so much for reaching out and considering me. Obviously, that's the first thing you want to say. I've noticed these things about your company. So I've noticed that you've made an announcement recently that you're looking to build a new AI application, or you're looking to invest more in your analytics team. I think that's great news. I've noticed that your company has started working on these projects or something like that. I think your product is super interesting. What I noticed about your product was this, and this. I would love to talk to you more about it. Whenever you get the chance, just ping me. I find what you're doing is really interesting. So thanks for reaching out, and It's up to you if you'd like to add them. I mean, why not if you're interested in the company? But how you handle it is just by showing that you've done researching a lot about what the company does, where it's going, the products that it has, anything new that's happened in the company that's related to data science. Shows the person who's reached out to you is like, oh wow, they've really paid attention. They really have a vested interest in what we're doing. And what are some important questions that you should ask the interviewer? Someone said. So you obviously, want to ask about the kind of data that they work with. Maybe they work with very highly problematic data, and this is the reason why they're hiring at the moment. They need somebody who could work out how to clean all that up. Maybe they're working with some really sporadic databases or something. So maybe it might not be a modeling problem. It rarely ever is. It's more like a data management problem. So maybe find out, and also gives you insight into the kind of work you'd be doing day to day, and if you'd be able to do that day in, day out, and if you like the idea of what it is that you would be solving every day. Obviously, so not only problem areas, but projects. Say, is there any kind of projects that you guys have in the works or want to have in the works in the future? Take an interest in those. Ask specific things about the projects. It's like, are you guys aiming to do this in the next 2 years, or right off the bat? Is it like so think about questions like that. It just says to them that you're the kind of person that would be able to come into the organization already having such a vested interest and idea of what's going on, because you've asked those questions. So other questions? I think I might go to live questions and then come back to these common questions, just so people are not waiting around too much. And also, Tarun's also welcome to pitch in.
Yeah, so there is a question from Veena. She is asking how to answer a question on what are you expecting from this role. So this is another way of asking where does that company where you're applying come into your overall career plan, right? So it is one of the other ways to ask that question. So you will have to justify at whatever stage of your career you are. You could be trying to enter into data science industry perhaps, or maybe you are switching companies. So you will have to justify why you are choosing that company and how does it figure out in your overall career plan. So that's what the question is. So you will have good reasons to talk about that company itself, uh, vis-a-vis some other companies or some other options that you might have had in terms of what would be your next job, Veena. There is a
Another question is, do you think suggesting new ideas and sharing those with interviewers about the company would be a good sign? Of course, unless you're planning to use your idea as a startup in the future that competes with their company. No, I'm just joking. But if you have an idea, and say, if you already have an idea of what could be a possible solution, obviously don't just come up. The downfall of doing that, I guess, would be if you were to propose a solution and they haven't finished telling you about the problem yet. How do you know the solution if you haven't heard all the details of the problem? Make sure you've listened first, asked all the right questions about the problem, and then if you have an idea, patiently wait and then give an idea to how a solution might work. And you might phrase it in terms of, oh, I was wondering if you guys have ever considered this, because it sounds like the problem is this, and thinking about it now, I wonder if you guys have tried this, because I know in my past experience, having worked on a similar project, it worked well. So it just, approach that. I don't think it's a bad idea, as long as you treat it carefully. Okay, another one is how to deploy a machine learning model in production. So there's going to be some front-end integration. There's going to be, so you have to, whether it's a system that executes your analytics script, or whether it's actually done through tools like Azure ML. It's just one of the many where they kind of offer you can deploy your model in the cloud, for example, and you can have like a front-end website where you give it an API key, and then it kind of like, so it depends on what the organization's application is and how you kind of put it into production, I guess. But there's always going to be some like front-end application of some sort. If it's an internal business tool, it's just like executing a script somewhere. Maybe when the data comes in, it's fed into an array, and an array from there is able to break it down into the variables and execute a prediction based on that, or run the script. So it just depends on your application, whether that's, for that question.
Okay, so there is another question from Sonal. She is asking what are the resources where she can learn how to practice coding part. Now, coding here is being used in a generic manner. So depending upon whether you are applying for a data scientist role or a data engineer role or a data analyst role, it will change. So maybe you are trying to say that how to practice R or Python, or maybe you're talking about how to practice SQL, right? So there are resources available. Some of them we might have already included in our presentation, so you can check that. But a good source will be always to go to a resource like Glassdoor, so you can actually go and search for that company, and there are people who have posted their experiences, so you can you can get a sense of what kind of questions are asked, right? So that is one resource. There are other resources which, if you Google out, you can find those resources in your search results. There is a resource it's called lintcode.com. So you can probably practice different kinds of questions, SQL or programming questions, which are actually good representation of the level of complexity that different job roles expect. uh, Again, if it is data scientist or a data analyst or a data engineer role, right? Many times coding questions start with SQL questions actually, right? So especially in very large organizations where they have a very structured way of actually conducting interviews, one of the initial rounds would be a SQL round, right? So you would want to practice your SQL, and the resources that I mentioned, Glassdoor or lintcode.com, you can go there and search for example or reference questions on, just to get a sense of what is the level of complexity that different companies are expecting in a role. I hope that helps answer your question, Sonal.
Awesome. Another question from Vino was, how can I answer a question about the most important metric that is important for ad marketing campaign? Ad marketing, first thoughts that come to mind is that they probably want to A/B test something, maybe not necessarily, but the metric, whether they look at number of user signups, number of clicks, you might want to mention things about, have they thought through their metric, and question things from the interviewer as well, like, oh, we're thinking this metric or that metric. You're like, why would you consider that metric or this metric? What are you trying to achieve by the end of the day? Because in ad marketing, sometimes you can run into problems where you've used the metric. I would like to base it on the number of clicks, but it didn't achieve what they wanted to at the end of the day. So whether they used this ad and this ad resulted in a high amount of clicks, however, they got zero amount of signups as a result of that. Whereas the other ad didn't get near as many clicks. So it got maybe, let's say 20% of the clicks that, ad A had. Nowhere near as much. However, everybody who did click on that ad actually resulted in a sign up. So the conversion is a hell of a lot better with the second ad. So just what would you consider the most important metric? The one that achieves the end outcome. And you might want to use that example, and you might want to say to them, depending on what you're really trying to achieve at the end of the day, if you're only looking at it from the surface level, yeah, you got a ton of clicks, but did you get a ton of signups as a second step to that click? So think carefully about your metric as one example. I'm just going to scroll down, and I have some questions already written on. Oh, I don't think I can. Just give me a second. I have some questions here as well. That's okay. All right, let's go through the live questions, continue through. So what else have we got? I might continue on these top top kind of condensed questions on. So we got a whole bunch of questions before the AME, and I thought I'd go through some of them as well. And I think an interesting one is, what's the best thing while I'm in college that I can do to land a job in data science pretty much right off when I graduate, or at least close to it? I would say, obviously, how do you start getting work experience? Look into community projects. There are a ton of like charities or organizations out there that might not necessarily have a lot of budget to work with. They can't go hire somebody, but they're more than happy to have somebody volunteer and lead them into a direction, lead them in, at least help them make a good solid start in becoming more data driven, or finding new insights that they hadn't realized before, or something like that. So whether it's a environmental organization or environmental charity that's looking for the best locations to donate, but it has a lot of data, but it can't figure out there has an idea of which cities would be the best to look for donations, which people are more likely to support their cause. So now you can do a whole bunch of like population and demographics analysis about, what are the kind of demographics that are moving into the area, that are going to move into the area in the next 5 years, maybe do a time series on it. I don't know. Just basically find a community project where somebody can't necessarily pay you, but you are volunteering your time, and you are going into a very small kind of charity or organization, non-profit, where anything you do will make a big dramatic improvement to where the current state is now. And so you can take that and say, not only do I have relevant experience, but I've also just taken a bare bones situation and put a bit of meat on it. I guess the analogy. So that's it. I think would be a good way to start. I'm really big on community projects. I like outside of my work, like to do hacks and things. I love doing that. And I think if I were hiring someone who also has a passion to do that, I'd probably find that a good character person. But yeah, anyway. Do we get any other questions come through?
Yeah, so there is a question from Zishan, whether there is a lot of competition at the entry-level data scientist role. Yes, the answer is definitely yes. But you will also have to be aware about how it plays out in the geography that you want to get a job in, right? So if I say, let's say, if I talk about the Indian subcontinent, any country in that region, maybe the challenge could be of the number of jobs available to get into, right? So that could be a problem, which may not be the case exactly the same way if you talk about, let's say, a place like US, right? So that will actually make the entry level a variable thing. But in general, yes, it is going to be a challenging one. I hope that answers your question, Zishan. And this is despite actually the scenario where, in general, there are more jobs available, but supply is less. But that doesn't actually allow us to get into any role, because people want to hire people who have skills, and they also are looking for people who have some business acumen. They are able to understand where the analysis is going to be used, and how it is going to be used. So despite being a scenario of uh, lesser supply, it is still not a very easy, entry point for anybody, right? So there will be a competition. Zishan, I hope that answers your question.
Just to add to on that, maybe you could find some niche area where there aren't a lot of people. So the good thing, I guess, in my career is that having technical writing kind of background just makes you a little bit more niche. Not many people do that kind of thing. Try to hybrid yourself into not only having the data skills, but having some other domain skills that might make you a bit more of a niche, and then that will kind of filter out a bit of competition, maybe. Yeah, just to add to that. Cool. All right, let's go. So let's look at some of these questions are redundant, so I'm just kind of putting them together into the one kind of question. So what are the things which every data scientist should keep in mind when searching for his or her first job? Sometimes you don't always have to go for the very large company. You might even have a better experience with a smaller company. Who knows? So look at the little guys. Try to suss out smaller companies that are just really genuinely struggling, and anything you offer them would definitely help them put them in a much better position than they are currently. You might have to work really hard, but this is you're at a time in your life where you can work really hard, right? So why not? Maybe just everybody's going to go for the huge company, that's doing really exciting projects. Just go for really tiny companies that nobody sort of pays attention to, and see if you can make your mark there first. It's not only me, but I have a lot of friends who've kind of, like, we all start out in really tiny companies and kind of make big contributions to those tiny companies because there's only like a few people at play who are running that joint. You want to be one of those people who are the few people at play who are running the joint. So try to find smaller companies. Keep that in mind. Keep it, everything that we've mentioned in the presentation, in the introduction, what you could be doing that could be hindering your being talking in cliches, not really being vague, not being specific when you're talking about projects that you've come across or worked on. These things could be hindered, not taking an interest in the company's data issues and problems, not listening enough to the problem first before just jumping ahead into a grandiose solution. So these things could be hindering you when going to an interview or during the interview. So I guess, is there anything else you wanted to add to that?
No, I think.
Yeah. Another question that I'm just kind of bundling them all together, but do I need a master's or a PhD or some kind of advanced level of degree I'm getting here? Not necessarily. I think you need a strong foundation, don't get me wrong. I don't think you can go into a role just winging it. I don't think you should go into any role winging it. I don't think learning on the job, there's only so much you can do. You still need, in most technical fields, unfortunately, they kind of require a strong foundation. So whether you get that through your bachelor degree or you go on to get it through some other degree, but don't clock up a whole bunch of degrees and then think that you're going to guarantee to get the best job ever because you got a PhD. Sometimes PhD people struggle to get jobs, so it's all about start getting your hands on some projects, start getting your hands on some data that is not just your rudimentary data set that you got off, Kaggle or whatever. It's just, although that's really important to start out with, don't get me wrong, it's super important. It's just go out into the world and go find it. Like, just really go get your hands on either community projects. They're a great place to start. Or if you happen to be lucky and get like an internship at a company and you got your hands on some real data and you've sorted out some real problems with that data and then you're able to improve modeling as a result of that. Whatever it is, it's just, it's not necessarily like, okay, I'm going to spend another 5 years getting my PhD now, because you'll be a fantastic researcher, but whether or not you're going to make applications that the business can use today and can start using in the next 6 months or something, like, it's just, whether they want to be able to continue to be in business, like they want to start doing something, so help them start doing something. And if you're in the research mode of mindset where you got to pay attention to all the little intricate research details, you might not end up being a desirable applicant. In saying that, having a PhD is not necessarily a bad thing. It's just, it means that you just become a highly specialized person who works on quite hard problems that maybe some of the bigger companies have these very trivial, hard problems that they need that kind of skill set for. But when you're talking about just getting a start in this field, to go all the way to PhD, I don't think is necessary. But that's just my opinion. What's your opinion?
So the way, it's again going back to that demand supply question. So there are not enough even masters or PhDs to take up those jobs, right? So to begin with, you have an opportunity. If you present some, if you have the required skills, you can find a job that is actually approachable for you, right? So there are jobs available, and there are not enough masters or PhD students available to fill those jobs, which means, and this is something that actually happens, there are people who are learning data science on their own, like place like Data Science Dojo, of course. And there are some other resources where you can acquire skills, you can build some sort of a portfolio. So when your resume talks about the kind of work that or projects that you have done. And as we mentioned earlier in the webinar, that if you have a website or GitHub repository that you can showcase, then you can actually build a case for yourself and keep at the back of your mind that actually at this stage, uh, people who don't have masters and PhDs have a very good opportunity to get into this business in the data science industry. If the industry saturates, maybe some in the years to come, or if there are masters or data science courses in all the universities that you can think of, then probably it will be a tougher entry problem to crack. But right now, as long as there is an effort from your side, you can build a case for yourself, and you can put it on your resume and convince people that interview me and I will prove that I have the required skills, right? So that's my input for you.
Yeah, get hacky. All right. Where can you practice machine learning? To practice it by yourself in a small room in the back of your apartment. No, you can practice machine learning anywhere. But I think, I guess going to hackathons is a really good way to practice your skills in a comfortable setting, surrounded by good company and like-minded people. And it's a good safety net to bounce ideas off other people, make sure that you're heading in the right direction, get some guidance, and also give back some guidance as well. So doing like hacks, whether they're online or you go to like a co-working space and participate in a day hack weekend or something, or I think those kind of things, like we kind of do that a little bit in our bootcamp too. We're trying to get people into the hacky mindset, so they can start practicing. So I think that's a really good way to practice machine learning, because the good thing about some hackathons as well, they will give you real world data to work with. It's like a Kaggle, but a face-to-face Kaggle competition, I guess, where they give you access to real world data, maybe a sample, not all, and maybe it's been scrubbed and cleaned, encrypted and whatnot for privacy issues, or it's just a public data set that they've released to the public. The government has maybe released public data. You are going to find problems in that data. You're not just going to get a data set. You're going to have to solve tricky problems around how they handle, certain invitations and things like that. So I think going to these hackathons forces you to practice skills, and a kind of in the comfort safety net of other people who are also in the same boat and might be able to pull together your resources to make it happen. So yeah.
And just to add one point, Soumya, obviously hackathons are the best experience that you can gain. But if you haven't started, you can start with Kaggle competitions. That would be your level one. And then wherever you have an opportunity to attend any hackathons, don't miss them. You will gain a lot of experience there.
Let's go back to the basic questions. So, common questions. So what kind of portfolio should I have to get an entry junior level data science or data engineering job? I would say work on your foundations. So if I could go back to that slide where it was like conditional probability, Bayes theorem, you have some maths and stats foundation. You have not necessarily programming, but you do need to be able to query data in some sense. You also need to be able to understand metrics around, or just analytics kind of metrics around how you measure things, and like whether you're measuring like the ad campaign, whether you're measuring clicks or user sign up conversion, things like that. So It also can be specific to the role. So let's just say you're going for a junior analyst role as opposed to a data scientist role. They kind of differentiate in the skill sets there. But basically, I don't think you can get away with doing machine learning out of the box in, just calling a function in R for too long without having to come across issues, or at least have an idea or a foundation in the maths and stats that's required for it. We're not talking about, abstract algebra or anything like that. We're talking about, just linear algebra and, conditional probability and, a few of the theorems like Bayes' theorem. We're talking about central tendencies. That kind of thing is really important. Understanding skews, understanding what your data's saying. Like, I think having a strong foundation in that. And I think then everything else is just calling a function in R, Python, but you're able to see what could have gone wrong based on your understanding of how the inputs need to be treated accordingly in order to get a better output, kind of thing, if that makes sense. Probably babbling, but I think, yeah. So I think that's the kind of portfolio you should be building, somebody who has that foundation. You want to say to the employer, I have the foundations in place, and the rest can be fine-tuned, pun intended. Let's have a look at some other questions that people have asked. So there's some transitioning from one career to another kind of questions. I should probably share it with you, Tarun. So, how does one transition from, say, a cloud computing dev environment, I guess that's what they're working in, to data science? Or if you say you're going from digital marketing and automation to data science, software engineering to data science, these seem like transferable skills. As I said, like you might have a niche role. And these skills when I say niche, I don't mean not in demand. I mean, they actually are in demand. There's a lot of like software engineering to data science at times, especially if you're looking at big production systems kind of things. And digital marketing, there's tons of analytics in marketing nowadays. It's I wouldn't be surprised if it turns more into a data science role in years to come, if it's not already. Cloud computing, yeah, you could deploy your models in the cloud. Once again, it's a company that's big enough where it needs some heavy duty infrastructure. So these are all transferable. You just have to find the role where your kind of niche is needed. So for a general data scientist role, maybe not so much, but for a company that has a lot of like heavy duty infrastructure things and you're a software engineer, yeah, that might be more attractive. I don't know, what are your thoughts?
Yes. So unless it is a case at your current organization where it is highly discouraged that people change your departments, uh, your current organization will be the best place to actually make a transition, right? So these days, every business has maybe within the IT department, but people have analytics department or insights department. So you would want to try your current organization first, and then if that is not the case possible for you to do, then you should try to think of companies where your existing skills and which you are actually working with in your current role, they can be actually transferred, right? So if you are into marketing, maybe you would want to join a company which uses data science, um, analytics or data scientist roles are existing there, where you can say that I have a background in marketing and I also know how to analyze data on my own. So my combination is actually rare to find. So give me a chance for an interview, right? So this is just one example. But given a choice, I would always encourage people to look into their current organizations first, because I mean, it should be easier for you to do that.
Okay. And I think I don't know what's our approach to normally. What's the interviewer's approach for hiring fresher data scientists? Did we answer this one already? I'm not sure. Anyway, but what's our approach that we usually take?
So, it's a very interesting question and very, very relevant for graduates or even fresh undergraduates. So, this is what we do, and in my opinion, this is what generally most of the interviewers do. So, we always focus more on the conceptual clarity. So, of course, we are not looking at somebody who has worked on text analytics, plus image processing, plus graph theories, problems. So, if we're not looking for somebody who is, let's say, who has experience from different functional domains in data science, but whatever you have put up on your resume, you should be clear about the concepts behind those algorithms, right? So very often with a fresh or an entry level data scientist or even a data analyst role, the questions or the discussion mostly concentrate about around basic questions on bias versus trade off, variance trade off, or why would you actually select not mean but median, or right, so as a metric of evaluation, because questions like these allow us to get a sense of how much involved that person has been when they were learning stats or maths or machine learning data science, right? So that gives us a sense of how easily we can train you actually in the role that we are going to offer, which we want to offer you, right? So uh, so that's where the most of the interview focus is on. And yeah, I hope it helps. This answer helps people.
Yeah, and I'd say like in get understanding the concepts of also when it's appropriate to apply them. Like, why did you decide to go with bagging as opposed to boosting, or something? I mean, maybe that's a bit trivial, but why did you decide to apply this particular algorithm? Because looking at the what we were trying to predict, the outcome variable, the kind of data points that we had, it was the most. It's a versatile. It can take into account categorical and numerical variables. So we had a lot of like variables to work with, and maybe say this kind of like randomized decision tree was very good at handling tons of variables, because it just kind of uses entropy or whatever it Gini index to try to pick out the top. Looking at an importance plot, I realized that these top variables, so the rest was just noise, I can eliminate it, but still the algorithm's robust to like handling tons of variables or something like that. It's just to show that you've kind of thought through, you haven't just kind of randomly gone off and said, I'm just gonna deep learning all the things. Like if you've thought about it, whether it's appropriate for this data, whether it's appropriate for the outcome that you're trying to predict, just have some reasoning or logic behind it. Like, yeah.
There is another question, very interesting question. So somebody has asked, how do I tell story about myself and my projects to stand out? So of course, you should provide the interviewer an opportunity where they can look at the work that you have done. Right. So GitHub repository will be one place where you can talk, you can make your code available, your analysis available, the output of your analysis available. But GitHub, working through GitHub repositories and making their links available is actually people have gone far beyond that now. So it's not very uncommon to look at resumes where people have given links to their portfolio. So they are actually full-fledged websites, right? So they have taken time and they have built a portfolio on WordPress.com, right? So you don't have to spend anything to make one, or even within the GitHub environment, there is a GitHub actually allows you to make your own portfolio using GitHub.io. So people are actually using those resources, and where they have presented their projects and and more importantly the output of their project, because it is much easier to look at, right? I mean, you can't run your code on GitHub, right? So they can only read the code and can get a sense of what you might be trying to do in that code file. but that's not possible. It's not possible to run it there, right? So in those cases, a website or a portfolio website actually helps. And going forward, actually, there might be some companies which will actually, the time of application, when you are filling their application form online, some of the information that they want from you will be that they want uh, to actually get your website URL. And this happens when they have already in the same form asked about your LinkedIn profile, your GitHub repository link, and then they ask for a website, any other website, or sometimes they make it, it's not mandatory, so otherwise you won't be able to fill up your form, but they expect, some companies might expect you to actually have a portfolio available online which they can look at. So depending upon what is the horizon when you actually are planning to start interviewing, you should actually invest in building your portfolio.
Yeah. So sometimes the good thing about if you can put your work online is that the hiring person or company can already research you. So by the time they get to the interview, they have a good idea of almost your technical ability and your aptitude and how keen you are. And so I guess by the time the interview, it won't be. It'll just sort of be on a personality fit, maybe. They obviously will probably still test you, but it's just they have an already good idea. So that's the advantage of that. I would also say that if you're taking a technical test, we have to script up something quickly. How can we edit? I would don't forget to comment on your code. So this could just be particularly to our company because I kind of look for things like that. I'm like, have you commented your code? But it's really important to, like Tarun said, they can't run your code on your GitHub necessarily. They can get the source file and have to run it themselves, maybe install these packages. But if you've commented your code very clearly, that says that you're a good team player, because if you have to reproduce or hand that code over to somebody else in your team, they can understand what the hell's going on. It hasn't been like customized to your specific mind, it's been like, it can be shared. So that's a good thing as well. And that's also in a dev environment. That's a good thing to do as well. Document coding, it's really essential. Especially for our company, that's a training company where we look to see if you've bothered to explain things to people. Yep, that's important. So if you go for like a training company like ours, like, don't forget to comment on your code clearly. Yeah.
And that portfolio actually doesn't stop at sharing your code or sharing the output or plots, right? So a lot of times, actually, in most cases, people also want to test whether you are able to communicate about your findings or not. So a writing sample, some sample where you have actually described how that what is the output, and a short report, right? So that also helps. Sometimes people are looking at whether you are able to communicate about whatever analysis you are making, right? Small or easy or complex, but eventually you have to communicate that to business audience within your own organization or to your client companies. So that becomes an essential skill. And like Rebecca mentioned, actually for our case, that is one of the most important skills, and we pay a lot of attention to whether people are able to write well or not, and that applies to all kinds of jobs for which we hire here.
Because at the end of the day, we're a training company and our job is to explain things to people. So think about the company that you're playing for as well. And I mean, you should do it as good practice either way, because when you hand your code over to somebody, they want to be able to see what's going on. Also, there's like general, programming standard practices. Make sure you wrap things up and it's not like spaghettified code and things like that. But for a junior level, I think you can learn that over time. I'm not the best coder, so I can't talk. Okay, let's have a little, what I've found an interesting question is somebody is still in school and they're looking at what backgrounds are best suited for a career in data science. I can be really narrow-minded, or I can be not so narrow-minded. I don't know which answer you want, but I say the narrow-minded view is like, okay, so if you're in a technical field of some sort, if you're if you've already, let's just say you're transitioning from computer science, or you're transitioning from research, or you're like some particular kind of field of research that requires a lot of data analysis. You're an astronomer who wants to become a data scientist, but you've already sort of done a lot of analysis, or you're in marketing, and that's like a heavy analytics kind of component of your role. But the people that we've taught surprisingly have come from backgrounds that you would never expect it, and then have gone off and done some amazing projects. Because wherever there is data, they've turned themselves into a data scientist, just working with that data long enough and hard enough and getting the proper foundations in place. So it could be, I don't know, a geologist. It could be a kindergarten teacher who just wants to understand like the kind of data points that lead to certain behaviors or in children or something like that, and they've collected a whole bunch of data that's during a certain time of day and during this combination of variables it results in certain behaviors in children or something like that. So it's interesting that as long as you obviously you need to get the foundations in place, of course. You need to, the things that I mentioned in the presentation, I mentioned before, get building those foundations. But the background per se, let's just say you're a kindergarten teacher. If you built up all those things, then you've got an application. If you've collected data and your, students or your Kinderland organization or whatever it is. So yeah, we've had people who are from really diverse backgrounds and made some interesting applications as a result of what they learned. Like, it was just surprising. So that's why I say there's a narrow-minded view and there's a not so narrow-minded view on what backgrounds are best. I guess this question could be pertaining to the kind of subjects that you want to make sure you cover. So don't forget to learn some kind of scripting language. Don't forget to get maths and stats up your sleeves, conditional probability, linear algebra, central tendency, all those kind of things that I mentioned in the presentation. And I guess the rest is just find your application. You can come from a particular domain and apply that domain and niche your role. Yeah.
Just to add one thing, so many times, if you are still a student in a university system, wherever, right? So you might be in US or outside of US. Uh, Universities sometimes have some certifications available, which might be outside of your current department, which you can take up, right? So it is just another a way of getting some formal education, although I'm not at all claiming that, not at all advocating that one should have a formal education, only then they can get into this industry, because I have mentioned that right now demand is much more than the supply, so you don't have to do that. But if it works out for you, you can think of getting a short certification, which would not take beyond, let's say, a few credits, and that will help you build your case. There is another variant of this question, so where people can ask. Actually, they have asked. So, let's say a very big company which hires a lot of data scientists or data analysts every year, will they hire me if I don't have a background in stats or maths or computer science or engineering? Now, the answer to that question is actually lies in the job description. So you will have to read through the job description. If the job description mentions that you will have to be somebody from those backgrounds, then probably you may want to rethink whether you want to apply there or not, right? Because if they have listed that as a deal breaker requirement, then probably they may not entertain resumes which don't have that background. And these companies actually don't read through resumes on their own, so there is no person reading through those resumes. They have algorithms, so they will just filter out your resumes automatically in those cases. And bigger the company, more likely they will be working through those resumes, sorting or filtering out or screening algorithms. So that's the question, and which actually brings us to the point that Rebecca had actually mentioned earlier. Uh, think of other companies. You don't have to necessarily start with a very large company or large organization. uh, right? So you can start with a small company. It will, it might turn out to be a much better experience perhaps, because you may get a chance to work in cross functional responsibilities, right? So that might be a better option for you, but then it depends on an individual to individual, right? So if that is what you are comfortable with, you can go for jobs which are available in some smaller companies, right? The companies are larger, they might have a very structured way of hiring process, starting from how they will sort out or filter out resumes, till how many rounds they would have for a particular or a given job position. So they are very, very rigid about it, because I mean that system has worked for them. So there is no reason, for them to not keep applying that again and again in hiring.
Sure. So do you, and you could also make your mark in a smaller company too. I've noticed, and this is just something, my own observation, not that I've it's factual correct or anything. Smaller companies, you tend to cover all the areas of data science. You'll be, obviously you'll be learning. I mean, they don't have anybody else who can kind of do this, so they're relying on you a lot. And maybe you have an opportunity to kind of do it at your own pace to some extent. Obviously meet some deadlines, but that's another advantage, is that, with bigger companies, bigger clients, harsher deadlines. I don't know. But it's just, you basically could cover a little bit more of the breadth of data science. I mean, you're not only trying to collect a bit of data, but you're cleaning it up. And then not only are you modeling it, but you also have to try and deploy it somehow into a front-end website or something like that. Whereas in a bigger company, they tend to have dedicated roles. So you'll be looking after a very specific thing, and maybe you just won't get the exposure to all the areas of data science as you would like to. You just have to be prepared to work hard. The smaller company, you probably work harder, but but it would probably be more fulfilling and set you up long term. Not always the case, but it could be. It might be a better experience for you for that way. So sometimes look for the smaller companies when you're starting out, more so than the bigger companies. Otherwise, there are tons of advantage to working at a big company. The people you can network with, the career trajectory you can. You're working with some senior data scientists probably. You can bounce off them, and so there's advantages to that too. Yeah. And I think another question here on the list, and I think that'll be all our questions from what I can see, unless anybody would like to ask some last minute questions, fire away. But how do I tell a story about myself and my projects to stand out? So that's a really interesting question. So storytelling about yourself. How to track back in time your journey that makes sense to a company. So it's like, let's just say it's a marketing company. You could say, well, I actually started off in sales. I had no traditional background to data science. Let's just say this. I'm coming up with a hypothetical scenario, but it's sort of applicable across people who are transitioning, right? So, and then I realized that in order for me to do my job better, I really wanted to go seek out not just, the typical sales report, but collect some more kind of interesting data points. So I took it on my own initiative to try and get that data as best as I could. So every time I contacted a customer, I asked them if they could fill out this short survey, and those who did. And then I thought, okay, I've only got a small sample. So then I thought about, how do I get a larger sample? And so you've like practiced some things already. And then I moved into a kind of marketing role. And then I realized that so it's just kind of like a step by step, I worked myself up into where I am today. Do it like a stepwise procedure for people. Maybe that's step 1, I started here. Step 2, I moved here. So they can see you have a clear trajectory, not only in your own sort of learning in your own career, but you're also going to have a career, you're going to continue to evolve and grow in their organization. You're not somebody who did something, the same job, didn't deviate from the plan for 20 years, and then you just, you're expecting that to grow now. It's like, yeah, what makes you suggest you haven't been growing in the last 20 years? But if you like somebody who by step by step, I started like evolving as a person in my career as well. I'm going to continue to evolve even more so when I enter your organization, and get even better. So it's just they can see that it's kind of a promising story. I don't know. That's just my perspective, but yeah.
And somebody did want to know, so how much data science?
So to be honest, I didn't have like a many years of experience. I kind of worked on like consulting projects, and I was freelancing with Data Science Dojo for a year. Or was it more than a year? I can't remember. It was like a year before I came on board. Something entirely different to what I was like kind of doing, and I think that helped me build up side projects as well, like community projects. I've been doing that for since 2014, but that's only like one-off projects. Something that was continuous was probably at Data Science Dojo, and then I actually came on full time here, and that happened last year. I finally joined uh, after years. So I wouldn't say that I had years and years of experience, but the stuff that I've worked on has been valuable. Like it's like saying that okay, it was a short period, but you did a lot in that short period, or you've had a long period and only did one or two things that were interesting enough. So I guess maybe that's kind of like how employees might judge it. But I guess Tarun is kind of quite the opposite because you've had like many years, right? Oh.
Okay, so as far as experience as a data scientist is concerned, that's fairly small. But I have worked in research and consulting business for 7 years plus, and all this. So that role actually involved data analysis and reporting about it to the business audience, right? So uh, but yes, it was focused mostly on brand and consumer research, and I have had some experience researching about political campaigns, political parties back in India. So this is how I would answer. The data sets that I used to work with in that role were fairly small, so they would rarely go around 100,000. Most of them would be somewhere around 25,000 instances or number of rows, sometime even smaller, right? And they were very specific problems which were centered around uh, how the brand is performing in a given market, or how what the brand should do, let's say when they are trying to enter into a new market like India or some other place, right? Or a category level understanding around, let's say, any food and beverage category, like anything like tomato ketchup perhaps. Yeah, so if you are talking about an experience with where I had the designation as the data scientist, yeah, that's fairly new, but I have had experience in consulting business prior to that. I hope that answers, or
Yeah, and for me, it
answers
was
the
just kind
question.
of get my hands on many projects as possible. So anything like analytics and website like marketing kind of thing, or if it's more like on the optimization things, trying to get as many distribute resources, maximize the hell out of, just find the maximum number, or if it's just like just trying to get as many hands on on diverse range of projects as possible, to build my experience. Yeah.
And just to add, so now that we are working with Data Science Dojo as data scientists, so we have actually a lot of opportunities to apply our skill plus our experience. So yes, because we are a training and education company in data science, so we are definitely involved in content development and content delivery, right? So that's one thing that we do. Apart from that, we have actually delivered a lot of interesting projects in consulting projects, which are actually the work that uh, data scientists do in health sciences. Right, so that's one domain that we have worked and delivered on. We are actually about to deliver a very interesting project for a major company in mining, in which is located in one of the Southern American countries. So that's another interesting project and a domain that we have been working with for the past couple of months. There is another interesting project that has just kicked off. It is with a mobile telecom company. It's a very large player, and again, it's a purely data scientist or uh, work that we are doing, and so I'm one of them, one of the data scientists who is working on it. There are some others who are also available on chat, and they might have actually answered your some of your questions. They're also data scientists, and they're also involved in those projects. We just uh, we are just being picky about what projects we want to work on. So we always pick up problems that are very interesting, and yeah, which actually we want to work on really. So I hope that
And it might not be
helps
like,
you.
and just to add to that, sometimes a project might not be so much on the modeling side of things, but it's just on a data management kind of thing, and also new sources of information you can add into the mix. I think, I think sometimes even that is interesting enough. All right, well, if you do happen to have a question, I think we can have a bit of time to follow up a little bit after this, but I would like to thank everybody for coming on board today and listening to us babble on and asking your questions. But I might hand it over to Blair just to finish this off. And I think this was really awesome. We should do this again sometime.
Thank you so much. Thanks again to Rebecca and Tarun, and thank you to everybody for participating. And thanks for everyone for sticking around an additional 30 minutes. I think we could probably talk about this all day, how to apply for data science jobs, what do interviewers look for, how to stand out on your resume. But I really hope that you enjoyed this Ask Me Anything, and we were able to answer all, if not most, of your questions. So what's going to happen now is sometime early next week, we will send out an email to all of the attendees for this webinar. In that email, we will share the edited recording of the webinar, as well as the presentation itself, some helpful links that we included in the slides, and some additional resources as well. If you are interested in some more free tutorials and talks, we do offer other tutorials, podcasts, webinars, and community talks on our tutorials site, and you can find that at tutorials.datasciencedojo.com. Another great thing is we publish new content on our blog every week. You can find content from machine learning and AI to R programming and Python. And what's really great about this is that it's open to the community. So it's also a great way to set yourself apart if you are looking for these data science positions. We are happy to provide that platform to boost you. And then there you have content that you can share on your resume and LinkedIn. You can also find us on our Facebook and LinkedIn community groups, AI and Machine Learning for Everyone. There you can find useful resources for, again, applying for data science positions, Machine Learning 101, and so on, and you are welcome to contribute as well. And then if you are interested in attending an in-person community talk, we have about 10 different meetup groups all over the world. I have them here listed below. So we would love to see you at our meetup groups. And another thing that's really great is we are looking for co-organizers. So again, if you are interested in setting yourself apart, host a community talk. Invite the data science community. We would love to give you that platform. If you are interested in attending or co-organizing an event, feel free to reach out to me or email help@datasciencedojo.com if you're interested. And then just a little bit about Data Science Dojo. We are a 5-day data science boot camp. We hold our boot camps all over the world. This is a basic to intermediate course, and we teach you the fundamentals of data science, from data visualization to predictive analytics to machine learning to text analytics to recommender systems and so on. We've trained over 4,000 working professionals from over 1,000 companies globally. If this is something you are interested in attending, feel free to reach out to me or help@datasciencedojo.com if you have any questions at all. Again, thanks to Rebecca and Tarun and our outstanding data scientists for being on the call and answering all of your questions. Thank you everyone for watching, and we'll see you next time.